Now, with all of this Star Wars Battlefront drama going around right now, this is a bit of news that might have sort of flown under the radar for some of you, and I feel kind of obligated to talk to you guys about anything interesting that happens within the Knights of the Old Republic space. Because not only do we know a little bit more about the technicalities of what's going to be happening with the game's studio, but we've also got an interesting perspective on how they view the project, and an answer as to whether or not we might see it in the next 12 months. But in typical YouTuber fashion, we'll get to that later in the video. So with that said, Embracer have officially announced the sale of Saber Interactive rather than it just being a rumour. If you're not caught up with all of this, essentially Saber Interactive are the developers of the Knights of the Old Republic remake, and it was reported a couple of weeks ago that they were selling Saber to a then unnamed party for $500 million, and with that sale, Saber would continue to develop the game. And now it's been officially confirmed by Embracer, Saber are leaving and they've been sold to a company called Beacon Interactive, which is controlled by the co-founder of Saber. So essentially Saber have kind of bought themselves out from Embracer, but through another company who the co-founder of Saber owns. It's a bit confusing. But some good news is that over 3,000 staff are going with Saber and supposedly keeping their jobs, and also 38 ongoing game development projects are leaving with Saber too. However, there was a lot of speculation a couple of weeks ago that this meant Embracer were completely cut off from the KOTOR remake, and it was moving along with Saber and only Saber, but this now might not be the case. In their announcement of the sale today, it's confirmed that while Saber Interactive has split from Embracer, Embracer itself retains 14 games in their pipeline that were in the works, including 2 joint projects with Beacon Interactive. Now, there is a section in the press release which details the transaction and the assets from Saber Interactive included in the transaction, and in this section it states all owned or licensed IP and related liabilities owned or held by the studios and entities listed. It also states all contractor relationships relating to the studios and entities listed. Now, based on the information in this report, and knowing that Saber are still going to be developing the Knights of the Old Republic remake, we can assume that this means that the license of Knights of the Old Republic and Star Wars in that regard will now be owned by Saber and not Embracer. This is indicative of the section that states all licensed IP and related liabilities owned or held by the studio are included in this transaction. However, this doesn't entirely mean that Embracer are no longer connected to the project, because Embracer state that they have retained a pipeline of 14 games, including 2 joint projects with Beacon Interactive. And they detailed some of these games, with one of them being called a previously announced AAA game based on a very major license. Now, I've seen a lot of speculation that maybe this could be Jurassic Park or perhaps Space Marine, but Jason Schreier, who was the one who leaked this entire sale a couple of weeks ago, is also on record saying that he thinks the game is the KOTOR remake as well. So there is that to consider. However, what makes this even more evident that this is the KOTOR remake is some of the comments from the CEO Lars Wingefors himself, who had this to say when asked if this AAA major licensed game would be coming out in the next 12 months. No, I think that kind of game needs some deep love and respect. So without giving full color, I think it's some time left until that is released. So with that comment, we can totally rule out Space Marine 2, because that's coming out in the next 7 months, but also the way he's speaking about it needing love and respect, I think it's kind of indicative that it's already existed in some way. He didn't say this is a license that we need to respect, he said this is a game that needs deep love and respect. You only say that if people already have some sort of preconceived expectation and there is already a level of hype surrounding it. Jurassic Park Survival, while a big license, doesn't really fit that. The only thing that does is a remake of something, so I think without an official statement we can assume that this is the Knights of the Old Republic remake, which means that Embracer are working with Beacon and Saber, and the Knights of the Old Republic remake is considered a joint project in some capacity. But what the hell does that even mean? Because Embracer aren't a development studio and they're not a publisher. Well, my only possible answer here is because they've already put significant investment into the game, they want some kind of financial return. So perhaps they will keep funding development slightly, perhaps they will act as a go-between the publisher of the game, maybe that's Sony, maybe that's someone new, but it's safe to say they're involved in some capacity, but we just don't know what that is. Now, another interesting point that I want to bring to your guys' attention is that they actually refuse to say the name. And this is a trending pattern that I've noticed over the past few years now with their press conferences. Another question was asked, and this person said, can we assume that this AAA major licensed game is Knights of the Old Republic? He directly name-dropped it and said KOTOR, and the CEO's response was really odd, because he paused and said, you mentioned a licensed name there and I can't comment. And it's like he tried to dodge even saying Knights of the Old Republic, or it's like he couldn't even say the name Knights of the Old Republic. And as I mentioned, I've noticed this being a bit of a trend. When they're asked about KOTOR, they won't say the words Knights of the Old Republic or KOTOR when asked about it. And I'm really curious as to why. If they're working on this project jointly, or if they've owned the license for the past several years, why can't they say the words Knights of the Old Republic in their press conferences? Because they will say Star Wars. They actually did this in this very conference. They mentioned Star Wars and Aspire's Battlefront, but when it comes to Knights of the Old Republic, the game that they've been working on for the past 4 years, they won't even say the name Knights of the Old Republic, which is just a really odd pattern that I've noticed. But of course, this could mean anything, it could mean nothing, but when they say the word Star Wars in other areas of the same press conference, but won't say the words Knights of the Old Republic, it makes me wonder if the title has been changed, and because the new title isn't announced in any official capacity, they just call it a licensed, previously announced game. But I digress. With all of this said, we now at least know that the license is at Saber, or more specifically Beacon Interactive, who now own Saber, and we also won't see the KOTOR remake in the next 12 months. And something tells me this is going to be a late 2025 or perhaps even a 2026 release, which kills me inside because that's 5 years. Jesus Christ. We also know Embracer aren't completely cut off from the project and they will have some sort of connection to it, but we don't know how big or small that connection may be. Anyway, that is enough from me today. I want you to let me know down in the comment section below if you're happy that Saber are in full control of the license and seem to be taking their jolly good time, or if you're still really worried. Don't forget to hit the like button, it helps me out a great deal, and if you haven't, perhaps consider subscribing to join the biggest growing Knights of the Old Republic community on YouTube. And if you want to learn about some more Star Wars video game drama, you should check this video out. It's my comprehensive review for Star Wars Battlefront's Classic Collection, and oh boy is it rough. I'll see you there.